Uh, okay. All right. Tonight we're going to start and on Nehemiah. And before we look at the text, I like to go through some preliminaries. And okay, then let's see. Share. Da, 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 da. Okay. Okay, then if you look at Nehemiah, and Nehemiah began by saying that he was, and at the time in Susa, and here is a map. Susa is part of the then Persian Empire, quite a far away from Babylon. Is probably then considered the winter then kind of a vacation. It was the citadel, it was the palace, the winter palace, and originally that would be the capital of in is in Babylon is still then basically the main city, but Susa would be the original home of the Persian and rulers, and so this is where they will go home. Just as like then Queen Elizabeth, and when she is a queen, she is in London, and but then during the then holidays, she goes back to Scotland, where their winter home is, and they spend Christmas time over there, then the New Year over there, then so it's quite far away. It's towards the east of Jerusalem, so then quite a distance. And Babylon is somewhere in between, so to have a little idea where Susa is. All right. Okay, the dates and that we need to have a little bit here. Let's see. I think we go back to a little bit and uh, the Persian kings Cyrus 550 to 530. That is the time of Zerubbabel. And when they came over to the first return, then Darius and basically the completion of the temple, and then in the reign of Artaxerxes and 465, and that is probably some 50 over years later on, and we find Artaxerxes became the king or the emperor, and so this is the time that we are talking about, right? So Ezra and arrived in Jerusalem in the 5th month of the 7th year of the king Artaxerxes. That is in Ezra chapter 7, verse 8. That will be about 458 BC. Okay. And then in Nehemiah, we read, and in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, this 20th year is referring to the reign of the king Artaxerxes, while I, Nehemiah, was in the citadel of Susa. So then this is about 446 BC. That is about 14 years or 13 years and after and the arrival of Ezra. So quite a time lapse. We need to know that the Bible doesn't try to tell us everything that happened, only the significant things that happened. And so in the historical timeline after the then what we call Ezra coming back, and you find that to establish what we call and the reading of the law and things like that. The next event that we have is the rebuilding of the city walls, the city. Okay. In Nehemiah, we read that in chapter 1, it is in the year and in the then month of Kislev in the 20th year. So Kislev is somewhere, and towards here you find that This is somewhere between November, December. And so this is one. Then when we come to Nehemiah chapter 2, we jump about 4 months ahead of time, and we come to the month of Nisan, which is the beginning of what we call the religious first year. That is when they celebrate the Passover. Okay, all right. Okay, then I have this one, and I've shown you, and on the WhatsApp, the map. I also given you a link, which probably give a nicer map, and but this is a map that is keyed into the chapter 3, and which we will not do tonight, and but just let you know it of time. Okay, all right, okay. Let's now look at and is where is my okay and oh, sorry okay uh, hmm, not this one. Um, okay, all right, Nehemiah. Okay, the a little bit also part of the historical background that we might need to review. And when King Artaxerxes came to the throne, it was a kind of a turmoil, and there were troubles, and his own brother rebelled against him. One of the provincial and governors and of the Transjordan also rebelled, and so he had to spend the earlier part of his reign putting down, restoring order, and that may be then also part of what we call the background that we have, and for Ezra, then uh, chapter 4, and in those days, and in the days of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, Bislam, then Merida, Tabil, and the rest of Israel wrote letter to Artaxerxes and says that these people are rebuilding this wicked city, they're restoring the walls, repairing the foundation of the city, and so the king and send this what we call the troublesome, and so uh, probably part of this background here is and we need to know that in Jerusalem, if you look back and at the remember try to figure the map in Babylon, and Egypt is to the southwest. So when there were trouble in Egypt, and he has to kind of pacify that area, and somehow perhaps Judea was involved in the crossfire. And so the enemies of the Jewish people took opportunity to then report to the Persian king that these guys are in league with the Egyptians, so to speak, and attempting to rebel against the empire. And so Artaxerxes, and there's no time that was given there. It was not dated in those days, and probably this will precede chapter 1 of Nehemiah. It could be, and after Ezra has come, and whether Ezra was involved at that time or whether he was there at that time is we can't certainly be sure. And perhaps that will also indicate that Ezra's and sign, who was actually sent by Artaxerxes in the 7th year of his reign, and then to teach, to enforce, to what you call it. And perhaps after the initial success, he had a bit of a problem, and because of the change of circumstances, that the relationship with the Persian king was not so and cordial, and so that was the situation, that there was this and letter to the king, and then saying they're rebuilding the city, they're rebuilding the walls, and then there was an order that Nehemiah and King Artaxerxes and basically says that and uh, okay, that says Jerusalem had powerful kings ruling over the Trans-Euphrates, referring to his predecessors, the emperors. Taxes, tribute are paid to them. Now issue an order to this man to stop work, that so that this city will not be rebuilt until I so order. Okay, be careful not to neglect this matter. Why let this threat grow to the detriment of the royal interests? So then there was this situation. And probably this is the background for Nehemiah chapter 1. Okay. And when we come to Nehemiah, okay, going all the way up this, I should just Nehemiah. So this is some 13 years after Ezra has come. And in between, there was some trouble. And that is referred to probably in Ezra chapter 4, which is a kind of not in chronological order. And so in the month of Kislev in the 20th year, I was in the citadel in Susa, that is Hanani, one of my brothers, not just a relative, but actually a brother. And most likely, then you find that in Nehemiah chapters 7, he said, I put in charge of Jerusalem my brother Hanani. So very likely it is not what we call a relative. Then sometimes brothers can mean cousins or relatives, but probably one of his brothers. Something that Hanani came and to seek out Nehemiah and to find support and for the people in Judea and in Jerusalem. Is possible. And because I think at that time Judea was under the what we call a province, smaller province under the what we call the governor of Samaria, and who is also under the governor of the Trans-Euphrates. So this is a sub-district of a district of a over district and kind of a thing. So perhaps because later we read the Samaritans and the people in Samaria were not very kind towards them. So maybe want to bypass them and come directly, and probably hearing that Nehemiah was somehow in high government place. And that is a possibility, but seems to be unlikely from the text. And one more than the what we call natural reading of the text is that Nehemiah questioned them about the Jewish remnant that survived exile rather than they came to report or to seek help. And it seems that Nehemiah asked a question about the situation in Jerusalem. And rather than, so it was Nehemiah who initiated the conversation. Possibly that Hanani has came to Babylon, and if they were then exiles, they were living in Jerusalem, then they may have some continued interest in Babylon, came back for business or for family affair. Then Nehemiah asked the question, what's going on about the Jewish remnant that survived exile and about Jerusalem. And the report that Hanani gave to Nehemiah was quite dire and quite devastating. Said those who survived exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down. Its gates have been burned with fire. Uh, Definitely, this is not cannot be. Then when Nehemiah heard these things, he sat down and wept. This is definitely not a reference to Nebuchadnezzar some then almost 100 years ago. Then that and the Babylonian destroyed Jerusalem. And that is way back. Then there a lot of things have gone through. This is probably a much more recent event. And as I have more or less intimated, that this probably was referring to the event that happened in Ezra chapter 4, which could be just before this kind of incident happened, whether Nehemiah was aware of the decree and or to stop work. And probably the people that went down to stop the work did more than just stop the work. They actually destroyed everything. And so they went beyond the then express decree of the king. The king basically say, stop work, and no one is to do any work until I so ordered. Probably they went back and took as a kind of permission to destroy the walls and to burn the walls and the gates as well. So this is probably reference to Ezra chapter 4. And when I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. Okay. So when they heard of these things, and now remember, this event and that took place was had what we call the order of the king that he's serving. The king actually gave the order to stop the work of rebuilding. And maybe the people that started the work went beyond that. So it has. And so he was in a rather tricky situation. He's serving the king, and the king has given the order to stop the work. The people went beyond that and destroyed the city, destroy what we call destroy the walls, and they burned the gates. So he was really, really distressed. He sat down and wept for days, for some days. We note and in chapter 2, about 4 months. Some days it's not just some days, it's 4 months. He mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. And definitely this is the essence of his prayer. It's not a one-time prayer, but this is probably a summary of the prayer that he has before God. And this is something that he prayed continuously before the Lord. God, the God of heaven, Lord Yahweh, God of heaven, the great and awesome God, who keep his covenant of love with those who love him and keep his commandments, going back to the Old Testament and the Torah. Let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer your servants pray to you day and night. So this is some days, day and night, for your servants, the people of Israel. He identified with the people. We confess the sins we Israelites, including myself and my family, father's family, have committed against you. Went more than what Ezra did. Ezra then prayed on behalf of the people, he involved himself. We confess the sins that myself and my father's family committed against you. We have acted very wickedly towards you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees, and laws that gave your servant Moses. But then he reminded God, remember the instruction you gave your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations. That is the reason for exile. But if you return to me and obey my commands, even if you exile people out of their father's horizon, I will gather them from there and bring them to the place I've chosen as a dwelling for my name. Okay, this has happened. These are your servants and your people whom you have redeemed by your great strength and your mighty hand. Lord, let your ear be attentive to this prayer of your servant and to the prayer of servants who delight in revering your name. Yeah, they have run back, but the idea of Isaiah's prophecy is go back, the city will be restored. Now, they are not in any way any better and slightly better that they can go back and rebuild. But now the city was in dire states, there's no wall, and the gates are burnt, and you must understand the importance of walls in ancient cities. Today, we don't have what we call walls, and in the sense, and even although Israel have what we call the Iron Dome, which is kind of security and by missiles and all that. But in those days, the way to protect your city is by walls. A city without walls is defenseless, and especially against invaders, bandits, and so a city without walls is not a city, okay? And it can be a refugee camp, so to speak. And so he prayed, these are your servants, your people whom you redeemed by your great strength and mighty hand. Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of this servant, to the prayer of your servants who delight in referring his name, your name. So Nehemiah recognized he's not the only one who prays, but probably he enlisted other people and together with his family, with Hanani, things like that, and to pray. So give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man. So verse 11 is probably 4 months later, and he's praying that today, give your servant success today by granting him favor to the presence in the presence of this man. Who is this man? The king. Very interesting to note that he never addressed and mentioned that this is the king. King Artaxerxes is powerful. He's a king over a vast empire. And Nehemiah is his cupbearer, a servant to the king, a high official. Yes, yes. But also then, but compared to God, whom he serves, whom he worships, King Artaxerxes is still human. This man. So I think he has his priorities correct. And okay. Maybe kind of aside. And today we have the elections in the US, and um Trump and became the president again. Some people are very happy, other people are not very happy. Uh, I've said to friends and say I'm not surprised, and I have kind of thought that Kamala Harris faces a big, big obstacle in trying to win the elections, and Trump is favored to win. I think, correct, although I'm not that happy about it. But people are fearful, and what will Trump do? Because what happens in the US has great implications for the rest of the world as well. And with relationship in Europe, the situation in the Middle East, the situation with Taiwan and China, and also and what happens in America affects people all over the world as well. And Trump may have become the president, and but I think then I was listening to then a theologian, Australian theologian, who was entitled his podcast and or his video, and waking up to Trump's victory. It says that, and remember, God is still in control. So in this sense, we need to recognize that even Trump is just this man. All right, God is still in control. Give me favor, grant your servant success by giving favor in the presence of this man. I was a cupbearer to the king. Cupbearer position is a very high position, especially in ancient times. And he's in charge of the king's food. He's in charge of the king's and wine, the king's drink, and he will ensure that it's not poisoned. And he is what we call this chief security officer, so to speak. And he would be he would not be what we call governors, but he has close contact with the king, and the king would implicitly trust him. And for a Jew, And to come to this position is quite remarkable. And so Jews out in exile coming to a high position. But there's also the upside of this. And Nehemiah, in order to become the cupbearer, probably would be an eunuch. And because of that kind of position, then there is a close proximity to the king's harem and to the concubines, to the queen, and it's unlikely that non-eunuch will be put into that kind of position. So for an eunuch in a Jewish culture will be sort of problematic, so to speak. Can God use eunuchs? And so it's remarkable that God uses this man who was a eunuch, just as God uses Ezra, who was a priest. A priest is what we call without blemish. A eunuch is one that is blemished, so to speak. And so the very interesting contrast between Ezra and Nehemiah and how God uses two totally different kind of people. Okay. Now, in the Old Testament text, there are no chapters, and so we find that he was cupbearer of the king. So in the month of Nisan, that is 4 months later, in the 20th year of the king Artaxerxes, and but in the calendar it will be the next year, so it'll be then 445 BC, and when the wine was brought before him, that was probably a kind of a celebration, kind of a party, kind of a royal, like a festive event. And I took the wine and gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before this. So the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This cannot be but sadness of heart. It is a dangerous thing to show some kind of a negative emotion in the presence of a king. And especially in a time of celebration, you might bring dishonor and to the king in front of his guest. And even though Nehemiah is a cupbearer and he can be executed very simply, go back to the story in Genesis, Joseph, and where we have a cupbearer and a baker, and the both of them thrown into prison, awaiting possible execution. So a cupbearer's position, even though it's a high position, is not necessarily a secure position. You can, if you're, and for any reason, the king can order execution. Now, whether Nehemiah deliberately allowed his sadness or he somehow, because of the months of praying and saying, and inadvertently allowed his what we call his sadness to appear, is debatable. But I think that based on chapter 1 verse 11, when he prayed, give your servant success this day by granting him favor in the presence of this man. So probably it was kind of deliberate. He didn't put a sour face, but he didn't try to hide his feelings. He was taught that after 4 months of prayer, this will be the opportune time, and to take the risk, to allow. He said, "I've not been sad before his presence in his presence before." So it was a kind of a calculated risk, taking things in his own hands, so to speak, and trusting God, praying God will grant him favor. So the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you're not ill? This cannot be but a sadness of heart. Okay. I was very much afraid. Okay. First of all, he's afraid because it is not right. It is not proper to show a sad face in a king's presence, especially in the celebration, the feast. And secondly, what he's going to ask is also kind of very reason to be afraid. He's asking for the king to reverse a policy or a decree that he has himself made. So then I was afraid. Okay. But he is also to be to be in the high position. He will know diplomacy. He will know how to be tactful, and he doesn't jump into the situation. He knows how, and the king did not execute him immediately. And your face said, "Tap, cut your head off." Uh, the king, why your face sad? You're not ill. This was a sadness of heart. See, so he says, "Oh yes, may the king live forever." Then say no. Then basically, the king live forever and ever, 10,000 years. Then he asks, "Why should not my face look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins?" Now he did not mention name Jerusalem. That will be probably suicidal. And that will, he doesn't bring in the politics. He bring in the personal thing. Say, the city where my ancestors are buried. This is something familiar. This is something the family, my homeland, my ancestry. Definitely never. And Artaxerxes know he was a Jew. Then it's not something that he's not known. Then but this is careful, tactful, bring a request. And why should I not be sad if the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins, its gates have been destroyed? Now, here is something that I think we can learn sometimes. Sometimes we people tend to be straightforward and not tactful, but we need to learn wisdom. And here is where wisdom can, I think, Lawrence and Albert and those who are in the business and know how to approach high officials, and when you are in a sticky situation, to know how to to what we call slowly bring in a very touchy problem. So he didn't ask the king and exactly what he wanted. The king asked him, "Why you sad?" "Look, oh Majesty, may you live forever. Why should I be sad when my homeland and my and where my ancestors buried, that city lie in ruins?" The king said to me, "What is it you want?" Very direct. The king. Then I prayed to the God of heaven. Some make this reference. This is an error prayer. See, he didn't have time. Okay, he's been praying for 4 months. He's been fasted for 4 months, but still, there is still this quick prayer that he had, kind of something. He pray in tongues or something like that. He just prayed then silently. Yeah, and answered the king. That prayer could have taken more than a few seconds or so, but it is still a prayer to God. I answered the king, "If it pleases the king, if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city of Judah, where my ancestors are buried." Again, he repeated the city of Judah, where my ancestors are buried. He again doesn't mention the name Jerusalem. Okay, so that I can rebuild it. Then the king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked me, "How long would your journey take? When will you get back?" It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. Now he had 4 months in a prayer. He probably had his plans, and in a prayer he was looking ahead. And or one thing about Nehemiah, I think that I send you a kind of a list of his qualities. He is a meticulous person. He is a man with vision. He is a man with preparation. He has a man with a mind with details. So he set the time. Probably the time that he said was not 12 years, and that was a time that Later, we find that he was a governor for 12 years. Probably he was appointed governor later on, but he is at the time probably a year or two to go and rebuild the walls and then go back. And so then maybe later he was appointed as the what we call the governor. So he set a time. We don't know what time, but probably it's not that long time, but quite a short time. To set a long time probably would not be then something that the king would be then pleased to do that. So probably say a year or two or something like that. But he also in preparation, I also said to him, if it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of the Trans-Euphrates, so that they provide safe conduct until arriving in Judah. So he asking for letters of support, royal letters of commission, so we can travel with safety. From Susa to Jerusalem is further from Babylon to Jerusalem. That was about 900 miles. This is more than that. So until arrive in Judah. Is it asking for armed escort? Probably so. Okay, later we find that there was armed escort. May I have also a letter to Asaph, keeper of the royal park? He may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel by the temple and for the city wall and for residence that I would occupy. So he's probably going to stay there for a while until the whole thing is rebuilt. And because the gracious hand of God was on me, the king granted me my request. So I went to the governors of the Trans-Euphrates and gave them the king's letters. The king also sent army officers and cavalry with me. Some will say there's a contrast between Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra didn't ask for camp and arm escort. Nehemiah did ask for arm escort. And probably we cannot read too much into that, perhaps except that maybe this was more troublous times. And this was more what we call difficult times. And the city was being destroyed by the enemies of the people. So he had an armed escort. He had letter authorization. When Sanballat, the Horonite, and Tobiah, the Ammonite official, heard about this, very likely Sanballat was the governor of Samaria, even though it's not mentioned here. He is probably then, even though it seems like we may think that Sanballat will be a foreigner, most unlikely not. He is the governor of Samaria. He is from the northern kingdom. And Sanballat has sons that are very Jewish names, very what we called, and so he's probably a Jew or a half Jew or a secularized Jew. And Tobiah is also a very Jewish name. He's called the Ammonite. Maybe he's again half Jewish, half Ammonite, but maybe he is the official in charge of Ammon. And uh, we don't have a lot of what we call accurate details of this, but luckily these are Jewish officials. That is not part of Jerusalem. They're a part of Samaria and Ammon and all that, but they are related, and they are probably not the regular God-fearing Jews, and but they were kind of liberalized and paganized Jews, and worshiping Yahweh to a certain extent, but having a lot of other pagan practices and all that. But he was probably in the midst of what we call the havoc that caused the walls to be destroyed, and probably Jerusalem and Judea was placed under his oversight. So probably he is very unhappy that someone has come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. When they heard about this, they were much more disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. Now, not that Nehemiah didn't go to him, bypass him altogether. He went to the governors of the Trans-Euphrates, who is the what we call superiors over the entire region. Anyway, he came to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, he set out at night with a few others. I had not told anyone what God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except one I was riding on. So it's interesting that Nehemiah, again, very tactful person, very meticulous person. He didn't come, announce, I am here on a mission, and he need to survey the situation. He need to assess the situation. Yes, he heard from his brother, but he want to see for himself. He want to know what it will take. So he want to survey the damage. He didn't tell anybody. He didn't involve anybody. Very secretly at night, he set out with a few others. So by night, he went out to the valley gate. If you look at the map, and let's see, then okay, uh, okay, let's see if you look at this map here. He probably then surveyed this lower area, and this is the lower area. Now, this whole city then is the old city that we have, and at that time in Jerusalem, in Nehemiah's time, the city was this this area, not the larger area that we have today, the old city. And this is so he surveyed the valley gate, and he went up and to survey the situation. Okay. Okay, let's go back to our text. So I went out to the valley gate, to the jackal well, and the dung gate, examined the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates that had been destroyed by fire. I moved on towards the fountain gate and the king's pool, but there was not enough room for my mount to get through. So I went up the valley by night, examined the wall. And I turned back and re-entered the valley gate. The officials did not know where I had gone and what I was doing. And as yet I've said nothing to the Jews, the priests, the nobles, or the officials of any others who will be doing the work. So he surveyed the area, he looked at the situation, he kept his plans to himself, because there are all kinds of things that could go wrong. Okay. Then he called the meeting. Then I said to them, "You see the trouble we are in? Jerusalem lies in ruins. Its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem and we no longer be in disgrace." I also told them the gracious hand of my God on me, and what the king said to me. Someone made a comment. Sometimes when you're in the situation and a depressed situation, you get familiarized with you can accept it, and it takes an outsider to come and to show you what the situation really, how bad it is. Sometimes you're so familiar with a bad situation, you accept it as normal. You need someone to come and to tell you, hey, you guys, we are living in disgrace. Let us rebuild. But they replied, let us start rebuilding. So they began this good work. He told them how God and related the situation, how God led him, and how God provided all the things for him. And Sabbalah the Haronite, Tobiah the official, and Geshem the Arab. Now another guy came in, and this is to the south, and about it. They mocked us, ridiculous. What is this they're doing? They asked, why are you rebelling against the king? I answered them by saying, here is where Nehemiah's priority is gained. He didn't say the king gave us permission. The God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or any historical right to it. So Nehemiah, Persian official, cupbearer to the king, with permission, with letters from the king, recognizes that his mission was God's given mission even though it has what we call and temporal and elements inside. He came as a Persian official with permission to rebuild the walls of the city. But he sees that more than that, his real commission, his real authority, his real mission is from God Himself. Okay? All right. All right. This is